With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
I'm doing well, and we have important things to talk about. I don't usually have my name in the title of the discussion that we're having. I'll have to figure out exactly what that means, and you'll help us do that, because I'm supposed to be the one talking about other things. But it looks like we might talk a little bit about how things are going here with social media, because something big, of course, happened yesterday. That after we finished the program, you came out and told me, it looks like you can't do any more posting. And I thought, holy man. And this was on our one site on Facebook. But, you know, this is something we've always been concerned about ever since we've gotten started and tried to reach our friends, you know, through social media, because we had a great experience during the campaign. Maybe that was a different era or something. You know, even the debates in 08 and 12 seems to have been a little more open than the things have been made for today. So we were surprised, at least I was a little bit surprised why this came out. And although we've been using social media, we think it's very important. The technology is great. We have benefited by it. Our viewers have benefited by it. But there was always this lingering doubt because it wasn't clean. It wasn't clean that this was a market activity. It wasn't like we were advertising and we were going to newspapers or going to the radio and having a program. This was a little bit more complex, especially for me, because I don't understand all the social media and all this works. But all I knew is it seemed to be a good deal for getting you know, our message out. But it was explained, and we talked a lot about it on staff. You know, they're capable. They have a lot of power. They can close us down if they want to. And that worried me. And my suggestion, my natural response to that was, we should be looking around. There should be alternatives, and we have to be ready. And that, of course, is one of the reasons why we were so supportive of Parler. You know, it sounded like me an option if the regular social media would say, hey, no more, we're going to close you down. So in a way, that's what happened, and it made us think very seriously about what's going on. And then we read and found out the statements made about why they did this, and they said we didn't follow community standards. Community standards? Who establishes community standards? Does the government do that? No. Big corporations do that. Those are community standards. Of course, you know, in free society there are community standards, but they're usually, you know, sort of an unwritten rule of the people you live with, what kind of moral standards each individual has. So there's community standards, and one of the community standards has been around for a long time, you know, thousands of years. You shouldn't kill people, you shouldn't lie, cheat, or steal, and those are pretty good rules to live by. But anyway, we were said to have violated community standards. We've been warned about it, and we did not obey, so therefore we have to be disciplined. And of course we were pretty discouraged by that because it's coming here, it's coming. But then they couched a lot of their accusations about the regulations and why they have community standards is we don't want anybody promoting violence. I got to thinking, well, that's not my philosophy. The philosophy we present on this program is nonviolence. We want to stop the violence, especially government violence. So therefore, it made no sense. And you know, Dan, you know a little bit about my history, and I had history even before I knew you. You know, I ran for Congress in 1974. It was the first election in '76. One of the first things I did was I wanted to spread a message of liberty, and I started a weekly program. And it's been called various things, you know, over the years. At first, it was just a recording by telephone call, and now it's a little bit different. We record it every day. So I've recorded a message of the things that were on my mind every week since 1976, and I was never accused of violating community standards or promoting violence and promoting sedition and a takeover of government. But anyway, those are the kind of words that were coming out. So this really bothered me, of course, because it didn't make any sense, and we stand for exactly the opposite. That's what libertarianism is. It's non-intervention. Stay out of the affairs of other people. Stay out of the economic affairs of other people if they've honestly earned their money, and stay out of the internal affairs of other nations, and don't go around causing trouble. And that sounds to me pretty non-violent. I would think that people who are trying to stop the violence and claim that all the violence is being spread by one group on the internet, they'd come to our program and say, how do you guys do a pretty good job of explaining why a society should be non-violent, and that people should be voluntary in all their exchanges, and that it can produce great prosperity and a much more sensible society. Well, no, I'm shocked. I'm being accused of that, which did fit well because it makes no sense. So I figured, well, the people who may be saying this, they must be confused. And the people in social media, you know, are smart people and they're very rich people, and you'd think they would know. But the one thing that they didn't seem to understand when they use their power and authority is they either enjoy it or don't understand what corporatism is, when they mix government and they mix business people and they contrive to do certain things. And I think that's what they don't have. And of course, that's something that we deal with. We deal with how do you solve a problem if you don't have that wonderful government there to decide what community standards are. We have to wait. And even now, they're talking about getting pre-checked. You know, prior restraint. Is it okay to say this? Okay to say this? So there's been a lot of talk about this, the interference with the First Amendment, how this is going to be handled, and what we may or may not be guilty of. So Daniel, catch me up to date. What kind of shape are we in today?
Well, that was really perplexing yesterday, because yesterday proceeded like every other Monday when it comes to dealing with your weekly column, which comes out on Monday. As you say, you've been doing it for 50 years, I think, at least, and it's you know, it's always about a topic of the week with you know, the Ron Paul perspective. And so we proceeded to put up on the social media, as always. Ironically, there was a line in your column that may have put someone else. Basically, you said, I find restrictions on social media accounts chilling. And then you yourself were restricted. That's the only thing that we can consider, because that's the only thing that was posted yesterday. And they said that you are no longer able to manage your own personal Facebook page, plus the Ron Paul Institute page, because of, quote, continuous violations of community standards. Which we were both perplexed about, because we've never been warned in the past about violating community standards, whatever those might be. And in fact, since we started the Institute in 2013, and then since you started your own Facebook page several years before that, we've essentially done the same thing all the time, which is posting articles dealing with the issue of peace and prosperity and non-violence and non-aggression and non-intervention. So we haven't changed, you know. So the question is, what has changed? And to bring you up to date, there was some consideration, there was some attention paid last night to the restrictions placed on our Facebook pages, and of course we didn't hear from Facebook. They didn't tell us what we did wrong. They didn't tell us okay to do this and do that. But we did find out through an article that was updated on Reason Magazine that Facebook contacted them and said, quote, it had been a mistake. And indeed our ability to post now has been restored. So we're kind of left here scratching our heads, because, yeah, okay, it's restored, but there's still this huge question mark. Why? What's the community standards? How can we avoid in the future? What did we do wrong? You know, and this is the real problem, Dr. Paul.
Yeah, and I guess I can agree with that. I think it was a mistake, but I'm not sure we're on the same wavelength as they are, because they did something which wasn't a total surprise, and it's a mistake from our viewpoint. Why are they even doing this? And that to me is a bit perplexing, because I don't know why some people have no limitations on what appears to be success, because the people in the social media, I think they have a lot of money, a bit of money, and a lot of money that is not well distributed. So they have the money. Do they need more money? Maybe it's just power that they need, because you know, we've been challenged, not severely so, but we've been challenged by better be careful about how you talk about COVID. So we would have opinions, because we sort of look at that as objectively as possible from a scientific viewpoint, and yet some look at it as, you know, as a political thing. So therefore, you know, that was a challenge, and the people who really are seeking power and control and political dominance, you know, have been able, it is my belief and estimation, that you know, they've used the COVID argument, and it's still around. That's still a big deal. That wasn't mentioned there, you know, in what they were doing yesterday. It was more on violence and suppression of people, and it turns out that it's a real attack on liberty is what it is, and I think that indirectly it may work out someday that we'll intellectually be able to figure out, you know, what their real goals are, and it just seems so strange now that this is sort of controlling speech is what it's all about, the controlling speech, because speech means so much, and that's why we have the swell speech. Well, why can't we have free speech when we talk about the various ways you treat the coronavirus? As a physician, I want various ways, and I also know that diseases are treated a lot of time by doctors practicing medicine, that is, using their brain and doing different things, and not held rigid by government regulation. So this is very rigid, and the goal isn't health, because they're not doing very well. Every once in a while, you know, they change their mind about what they've been preaching about it. So this is a big speech issue, political speech, and I think that what they're concerned about is that they get fearful and frightened. I feel like people that throw their weight around and want to control everybody else, it's hard to really prove this. This is just an opinion. I think they're insecure. How could people be not satisfied with their achievements if money and power and influence in politics isn't their goal? But they still don't say one word that contradicts us. But I also think when they control speech and words, and just think of what's been going on in the last couple of months, controlling speech and controlling words, what 1984 was all about. The people who control speech control the world, and controlling history and all these things. So in many ways, I think that is involved. Hopefully, what I'd like to do is try to explain my position and try to influence people and set it as a standard of how we want to change the world. And of course, some people might say, yeah, it might be doing that, but you're not going in the right direction. How are we going to keep our big government programs going? And there's a couple people in Washington, and although they would never admit they support the same principles, they all do. They all support the same principles. Yeah, but one girl will say, I'm for the Constitution. Right, left, middle, everybody's for the Constitution. But when you look at it, that is a joke on what they're doing, because when it comes to personal liberties, civil liberties, when it comes to war, and they talk about preventing violence and preventing terrorism, and then what do? We're the policemen of the world, and who supports it? Republicans and Democrats. We can get a couple handful of people who would say we are really truly against the violence, and that means we have to change our philosophy, and we can't do it with the philosophy being followed now, because we have not a philosophy of non-intervention and minding our own business. We have the philosophy of interventionism. It's an acceptable thing. It's preached in the universities, and the only question now is how should we intervene? Who should be the boss? And who should intervene? What should be done in the economy? How the money should be spent? How much should be printed? What the interest rate should be? All that nonsense and the total rejection of liberty. So I would like to daydream and think, well, maybe we're on the right track. Maybe we're actually proposing something that is indeed a threat to some people who preach and live by the laws of interventionism and control. And I think there is a lot to that, and they have to squelch it, because I think that the philosophy of liberty is based on a moral principle that if anybody with a little common sense and a little open-mindedness, if they knew about it and say, there's a good record for that, and it makes a lot of sense, and people can be prosperous, and the government is minimal, and government power isn't used for special interests. But we're a long way from that, but I still like to think that that is an issue, because certainly the issue of my program, my little program that I have here, and the people I reach, and don't they know I'm not even in office anymore, and we just talk about what we talk about, trying to sort out the truth from fiction, and yet people get nervous about it, and people get closed down. Just think, some people who are devising some alternative to social media, boy, they're competitors too, and they could get closed down. So Daniel, it's a struggle, but I know that the people that work with us have firm beliefs and convictions. They're based on moral principles, and it's the principles of nonviolence. Matter of fact, the greatness of Martin Luther King, he didn't endorse that principle entirely, but he certainly did on civil liberties and war. And quite frankly, I believe he lost his life over the fact that he would not go along with the status quo on war. And the Republicans and Democrats happen to be very much entrenched in war and war spending, no matter what the conditions are, and whether they're fighting to impeach somebody or anything else. When it's necessary to express our aggressiveness overseas and promote a foreign policy of interventionism, they're pretty much together. So those are the points that are so dangerous to people who depend on a conspiracy of terrorism and scaring people to death and use other power to scare us. And I have to admit that I think about that. How do I get my message out without caving in and saying, okay, what do you want me to say? Here's my report. Can I read this today? But they do that. It's intimidation, and you lose your jobs. And just think of the intimidation going on now as a consequence of this election and the chaos in Washington. It's indirect now. You can lose your job, your money, your correspondence, and all these things. And it to me is very, very serious. But I think the answer is finding a principle of non-interventions in the principles of liberty. It can go a long way to solving these problems. Daniel?
Yeah, I'm just backing up a little bit, Dr. Paul, because you made a good point earlier. You made a lot of good points, of course, but earlier on when you mentioned the coronavirus situation, because yes, we have indeed walked on eggshells over the course of the last several months, because it's been made very clear to us what you can and can't say. Your position has been clear, which is very skeptical of lockdowns, finding them counterproductive, and finding them more harmful than good. And in fact, it's interesting because that was supposedly against the science. You can't say that it's against the science. And now all of a sudden, I know that you probably noticed this, Dr. Paul, none other than Governor Cuomo has done a flip-flop, has done a 180 and said, we can't stay locked down forever. There's not going to be anything left to open up. You know, the lockdown is bad. And even people like Neil Ferguson in the UK now are changing their tunes on these things. So this is the danger of a rigidly enforced, sort of paradigm, rigidly enforced by big social media companies. You can't say this because it goes against this. Well, these things do change quite often, in fact, and it does have the effect of squelching debate. And the genius of suppression under the Soviet system was not that they had someone in everyone's house making sure they didn't say anything against the government. They didn't have someone with a gun to your head making sure that you went out and marched on May Day. What they did is they got people to self-censor. They stopped bringing up controversial topics because that doesn't work. Hey, I don't want to lose my job. I don't want to lose my friends. I don't want to lose my social media account. So people just stopped talking about controversial things. What did they do? They buried themselves in alcohol and narcotics and other things because it's a part of human nature to express our views, even on controversial things. Like you've always said, Dr. Paul, we don't have free speech so we can talk about the weather. And so this is the real danger of this sort of shrinking the public sphere, the ability for us to talk to each other, the self-censorship. It causes severe psychological damage. It causes damage to our way of life, to democracy, for lack of a better word. And hopefully, people will start waking up. If you don't like Donald Trump's tweets, don't follow him. If you don't like Nancy Pelosi, don't follow her. If you don't like Press TV, don't read it. But don't go into this frenzy of trying to cancel everything just because you don't like it. Dr. Paul, it is such a chilling path. And I'll just close out, by the way, just reminding people again, and I'll put a link in. We've had a great response, just asking people to sign up so we can keep in touch with you. We've gotten a lot of people saying, hey, if something happens, we're going to help you find another way. We want to be able to tell you what that other way is. So there will be a link in the description where you can sign up for Long Haul Institute updates so that we can keep in touch and keep you posted. Thanks, and back to you, Dr. Paul.
Very good, Daniel, and thank you for making that point about what my opinion is about the First Amendment. And I have said that so many times. It's not to be able for us to talk about the weather. Well, what is it for? It is mostly for our right to criticize the government. And right now, the government is very broad and defined by community standards. Who's the community? Oh, well, they're people that are around. They're important people. And they're part of the deep state, but they're very smart and they're very rich, and therefore they can do this. So they will help devise and get us to understand what the community standards are. So this is a thing that's going on, but it's very important on understanding it. But, this whole thing about the COVID, they always turn around and say, oh, you want people to die and this sort of thing. No, we don't even interfere with people's choices. You take, for instance, the mask. We talk about it. A lot of people talk about it, and a lot of experiments have been done. And the side that says, the masks aren't worth all that much, in a scientific manner. And then you have disagreements. You'll get great scientists that will disprove this and say it isn't. Well, in a society that allows discretion, allows you to make your own choice, that if you're concerned about it, we would never prohibit it. Wear a mask and you will be safe. It's so simple. If you don't think it's good and you think there's a negative to it and there's a detriment to it, especially to kids, you have a right not to wear a mask. And why is that so hard to understand? The whole thing too about the banning of hydroxychloroquine, it came out, even though it's been around for 50 years, as a reasonable thing to talk about, in a treatment of COVID. And the AMA went along with it, and the government went along with it. No, don't use it anymore, even though it's been used for so many years. But then just recently, quietly, the AMA came out and said it's not too bad of an idea. But what I'm talking about is let people have freedom of choice. Let them go to the individuals that they trust and give them information. Because right now the people are so mixed up and they're not believing what the government's telling them. And there's reason to wonder what is the right thing to do, because they're saying that you can't do this. And vaccines are another thing. Some people have legitimate reasons to be concerned about vaccines. Other people say that's a crime against humanity, and you're a terrorist if you don't do that. You're threatening the lives of the world. But that's not it. The voluntary approach, people making up their own minds, that's really the answer to it. And people who have in Florida and other places, South Dakota, who have chosen not to ban people getting together, That doesn't mean if there's a contagious disease, getting together doesn't possibly expose it, but make your own decision about this. And a lot of people have just felt that it was overkill with the banning of groups together in schools and letting kids go to school, and they go and defy it, and then they get arrested and fined and ostracized. So it all fits the argument that freedom is an answer to many of our problems, and the rejection of violence, and the effort now to play mischief with the internet and all is always used to promote non-violence and get rid of the terrorists and all this. And yet, what government does, you have to realize that everything that government does is based by force. They use force for everything they do because they don't have anything. They don't create wealth. They have only force that they can use, whether it's on militarism or whether it's just dividing up the wealth among the select few in a society that calls themselves a free market, but it really is crony capitalism, or whether it's on individuals. So that is what has to be challenged. But the principle to accept is so clear-cut and so simple that if you just ask people whether they believe in freedom of choice in your personal life, they say, good, do you believe you ought to be able to spend your own money the way you want? Yeah, people believe that too. Do you think it's about time we quit fighting all these wars overseas? They say, yes, that's a good idea, let's do that. And yet at the same time, the people who control the words that go out there and control the propaganda take an opposite position, and they get hysterical if somebody offers a principled challenge to that system that they love and depend on. So we have our hands full in promoting a non-violent society, and we're going to continue to do it. And I actually am optimistic because I've talked to a lot of young people, and when they know about the choices and hear about it, believe me, they are very much likely to pick and choose liberty, rather than picking and choosing the malarkey that comes from the Marxists that are around and are so present in our universities. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.